Welcome back. I will now quickly go over yet another very important concept in CSS, the box model. So, basically all HTML elements can be seen as boxes. What the box model does is to allow us to define space between elements and to add a border around elements. The box model consists of margins, padding, borders, and the actual content of the box, for instance, text. This image shows very well how the box model works. So, the content is where text and images appear. The padding is like a transparent area around the content, but inside of the box. The border of the box goes around the padding and the content and may be transparent or not. And finally, the margin is the space between boxes. Now, padding, margin, and border are properties in CSS and can be specified for the entire box or for individual sides, top, bottom, left, or right. We will use all of them later. The box model also allows us to set the height and the width of an element. Now, the annoying thing about the standard box model that I just showed you is that you just set the height and the width of the content, not of the entire box itself. This means that padding, margin, and border will be added to the height and width we specify, which is actually not what we want. But fortunately, we have a good solution for that. There is this very useful CSS property called box sizing. If we set box sizing to border box, the height and the width will be defined for the entire box. We will use this in a second. Because there is one last thing I need to tell you about the box model. In HTML, there are block elements and inline elements. Block elements use the full width of the browser and enforce line breaks. Headings and paragraphs are examples of block elements. And inline elements don't do any of that. For instance, images, links, strong and EM elements are all inline elements. What's important about them is that you can neither set their height or their width. But enough with theory lectures. Let's get our hands dirty with what we just learned and get back to brackets. As you can see on our web page, here in Google Chrome, there are already some margins between elements. For example, this one here and this one, it's all full of margins already. And that's because all browsers add some default margins if we don't specify any. So let's start by remove the default values. And to do that, we create some rules that will affect all elements on our web page using the asterisk selector, which goes like this. So we just type this. Now all elements are affected. That's why you have these blue boxes here around all the elements. This is a way of brackets showing us that all these elements are affected by the selector. Now here we set all margins and paddings to 0, and that's how it works. Just write margin 0 and also padding 0. So you see all the margins completely disappeared. Now, do you remember the box sizing property? We want to set it to border box for all elements, and this is the right place to do exactly that. So, just write box sizing and then choose border box. Save it, and alright. So no margins and no paddings anymore. Now, I think we should add some margins to some of the elements. First, I would say that the main heading needs some margin, right? This main heading right here. So remember, margin is the white space between boxes. We want some margin between these two headings, the H1 and the H2 heading. So we add a margin bottom to the H1 element. So remember, I said we could specify the margins to all the sides of an element. And so now I will specify the margin at the bottom. And let's put 20 pixels here. That looks like a reasonable amount of white space here. And now the same thing for the secondary headings, because I also don't like that there's no space between the H2 element and the paragraphs. So it's again margin bottom, and here I think 10 pixels might be enough. Okay, that looks much better, don't you think? Finally, I would like to add some margin after the main paragraphs. So if you remember, the main paragraphs are this one and this one. And we defined that in the lecture before using this class here. So again, margin bottom, and let's say 20 pixels. So we get some nice spacing here. So it looks a little bit cleaner right now. And that's it for this lecture. I hope you learned a lot about the box model, which is really important. So if you didn't, just go back and look at it again, because in the next lecture we will really need it, because we will start to build a simple layout where we will use the concept that I showed you in this lecture. So, see you there.